On Boxing Day, the 26th of December, 1962, snow began to fall across Britain. Initially, it felt normal. A quiet dusting blanketed rooftops, softly whitening roads, gardens, and fields. Children pressed their noses to frosty windows, hopeful. Adults pulled their coats tighter, stamped their feet, and carried on. Snow had fallen before, and hard winters had come before. Nothing about that morning suggested anything extraordinary. However, Britain had already crossed a threshold and didn't yet realize it. Within days, the temperature plummeted. Then it dropped again. Cold air surged in from the east, carried on winds that seemed to strip warmth from the land itself. Snow returned, not in a single great storm, but repeatedly. Each snowfall erased the last footprints and hardened the softened daylight. By the final days of December, the country was struggling. This wasn't a passing storm. It was a season settling in. By early January 1963, Britain was locked in ice. Daytime temperatures remained below freezing, and nights plunged far lower. In some areas, frost never truly lifted, even at midday. Roads disappeared beneath drifts taller than garden walls, and country lanes vanished entirely. Villages awoke to find themselves cut off overnight. Postmen trudged only where they could, and buses stopped running. Deliveries failed, and railways slowed, then failed altogether. Points froze solid, signals malfunctioned, and snow-clogged machinery built for milder winters. Trains stood motionless in stations, carriages rimmed with frost, and their interiors colder than the platforms outside. Milk bottles froze on doorsteps before dawn, their silver tops split open by ice. Bread became scarce, and shops opened late, if at all. Coal wagons stood idle, their loads locked solid by frost. Power stations struggled to keep pace, and electricity faltered, lights dimming. In homes already darkened by short winter days, even that small comfort felt uncertain. The cold crept everywhere. It crept beneath doors, along skirting boards, into cupboards, kitchens, bedrooms, and even into bones. Frost formed delicate white patterns on the inside of windows. Overnight, water froze in bedside jugs, and breath hung visibly in living rooms long after sunrise. Families wore coats indoors, scarves at the table, and hats pulled low even while sitting still. Gloves were worn to bed, and hot water became rare. Baths were rationed to once a week at best. Kettles were filled sparingly, and every cup of tea felt earned. Fireplaces glowed, but the warmth barely reached beyond the hearth. Even standing close, the cold pressed in from all sides. By mid-January, the country felt entombed. Fields vanished beneath endless white, hedgerows blurred into frozen walls, and road signs disappeared. Gateposts became markers. Familiar landscapes felt strange, flattened, silent, and unrecognizable. Footsteps were the loudest sound for miles. Voices carried further in the frozen air, then fell away quickly into stillness. Silence felt heavier than snow. Rivers froze hard enough to walk on, and canals became long glass corridors, with narrow boats trapped where they lay. In some places, even the sea slowed. Along parts of the south coast, ice formed on beaches and harbor walls. Waves stiffened into fragile shapes, and the shoreline itself seemed to pause. In London, fountains froze mid-arc, water hanging suspended in motion as though time itself had stopped. Parks transformed into skating grounds. The Serpentine became a broad sheet of ice, and children slid and laughed with cheeks red and hands numb. Parents watched anxiously, torn between fear and wonder. Football matches were played on frozen pitches, with boots ringing sharply on iron-hard turf and crowds stamping their feet for warmth. Breath rose like smoke, and the ball skidded unpredictably, refusing to behave. Every kick echoed in the brittle air. Days blurred together, snow, ice, and silence. The radio became a lifeline, and weather forecasts were followed closely, voices steady but grim. Each report promised more cold. When roads were blocked, people walked miles through snow to check on one another. Elderly neighbors were visited daily, children counted, fires shared, and food was given without fuss. Strangers offered lifts where roads allowed, and coal was divided. Shops rationed quietly, and there were no signs or shouting. Everyone understood. In kitchens lit by candlelight, families gathered closer, sharing stories and memories. Games were played at tables pulled tight to the fire, and time seemed to slow. However, hardship pressed on. Pipes burst in the night, flooding homes during brief thaws. Floors warped and walls cracked as damp followed the cold, clinging stubbornly to rooms already exhausted by winter. The elderly suffered most, their joints and lungs settling into the cold. Chronic illnesses worsened, and hospitals battled shortages. Staff walked miles through snowdrifts to reach wards. Ambulances moved slowly, and sometimes not at all, and doctors went on foot, medical bags slung over shoulders, boots crunching through frozen streets. Farmers faced relentless losses. Livestock perished in open fields, and feeding animals became a daily battle. Water troughs froze solid, and fields lay unusable beneath ice and snow. Each morning brought new damage, and the winter showed no mercy. February arrived, and still, the cold did not ease. Snow fell again, burying what little movement had returned. Each fresh layer erased paths, drifts deepened, and patience thinned. Britain had now been frozen for weeks, and schools remained closed. Children learned by candlelight or not at all, lessons replaced by chores. Long days were spent indoors, staring out at unmoving white. Factories slowed or shut entirely, shifts were missed, and wages were lost. Life shrank inward, seeking warmth, routine, and survival. Yet even now, there was beauty. Moonlight reflected off the snow so brightly that nights glowed blue and silver. Stars felt closer, and the sky sharper. Every sound seemed magnified. Church bells rang across frozen fields. Their notes lingered longer than usual, their final chime fading into the night. Britain endured. March arrived, but spring did not. Snow stubbornly clung to shaded lanes, and ice clung to rivers and rooftops. The ground remained hard, unwilling to release winter's grip. When the thaw finally came, it arrived slowly and reluctantly, followed by floods. Meltwater overwhelmed drains and rivers, turning fields into mud. The damage revealed itself in stages: cracked roads, split pipes, and flooded homes. But something else emerged too. People lingered longer in conversation, and neighbors continued checking in. There was a shared understanding, unspoken, that something rare had been lived through together. For children, the winter became a measuring stick. Every cold season afterwards judged against it. For adults, it became a reference point, a sentence passed down through decades. It was cold, but not like '62. Years passed, but memories returned uninvited. The sound of snow brushing against windows at night, the sharp burn of frozen air in the lungs, the glow of a single fire holding back the dark, and the sense that the outside world had paused. The winter of 1962 to '63 became more than weather. It became legend. Not because it was cruel, but because it was endured. In the cold, Britain found resilience. In scarcity, kindness, and in isolation, community. And that is why it is remembered.